back to Cop to Corporate Life After Law Enforcement. I'm your host, Sam, and on this podcast, we share real stories of officers who have traded in the badge for a new chapter in the corporate world. Today, I'm joined by Colin Whittington. Colin was on our podcast 3 years ago. I didn't get the chance to interview him because I think I joined just like a little bit after, but his post-law enforcement career has blown up. We'll talk about the power of LinkedIn, power of resumes, his new career transition program called the Heroes Academy, and his journey of becoming a best-selling author and CEO. Colin, welcome back.
Hey, Sammy, thanks so much for having me on the show. It's an honor to be back. Like you said, I came on the show almost 3 years ago now with Brian, and I had just started this company. And for Brian to take a chance to have me on was so exciting. And now, 3 years later, to come back and talk with you is so exciting. And then we met last October, I think it was, and that was a great time. And yeah, I'm really excited for a good conversation today.
Me too. It's always really cool to be able to meet people that you've known for a while online, especially that you do such similar stuff to. So meeting you back in California with Brian, like that was such a great experience.
Oh yeah, and that's I think we'll talk about today. Like you said, LinkedIn is just it's been besides helping me people find jobs and business growth and stuff like that. It's just such a cool way to meet people. I met
Mhm.
Brian through LinkedIn, like met you through LinkedIn, met you guys in person. I met a gentleman in Ireland who had me come out and speak at a conference in Ireland. So I got to travel internationally to speak. And it definitely shows how cool that platform is when you use it right. There's definitely people who abuse it and don't do what you should do on it. But overall, it's a really cool platform.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've got a lot of valuable information to share with our listeners today. So let's just get started. For people that haven't heard your story as a police officer or didn't listen to our earlier podcast, tell us a little bit about what your law enforcement life looked like.
Yeah, so I joined law enforcement in 2015. I was a deputy sheriff for the largest sheriff's office in Virginia, which is the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office. And that agency is located about 45 minutes from Washington, D.C. It's about 700 sworn deputies between courts, corrections, and patrol, which is what I was. So I worked in patrol for a number of years. After that, I was asked or voluntold to become the PIO for the agency, which learned a lot, didn't love that actual work, but it was a cool experience. And then I was eventually promoted to sergeant and put in charge of the background investigation and recruiting unit. And that's where I really fell in love with recruiting and realized I had a passion and a skill for it. And I was in that role during the start of COVID, during the George Floyd era, and recruiting for law enforcement during that crappy time. And I kind of joked that if I could recruit for law enforcement during the mid 2020s, I can recruit for anything at any time. But it was a really cool, I love my time in law enforcement. Got a couple of life-saving awards, was named the Deputy of the Year for the whole state of Virginia, which was pretty cool. But like so many young officers, just like you too, Sammy, after a handful of years, I realized that I wanted to leave the profession. Number of reasons from financials, the long hours, the holidays, the feeling lack of appreciation at times. So I ended up deciding to leave law enforcement in 2022 and went into the tech industry as a recruiter and ended up joining a company that I really didn't align with ethically, morally, and a few other things as well. So I always have a cautionary tale to officers when they prepare to leave to make sure they join a good organization. When I made that transition, I've always been very active on LinkedIn, like I said already, and started telling my story about my transition and started getting more and more messages from cops all over the country and the world, even asking for help and advice. So I ended up just giving a few resources here and there while I was helping people with their resumes or interviewing them or whatever else, just as like a for fun kind of thing. But it kept getting more and more. I kept getting more and more people reaching out, and that inspired me to start recruiting heroes. What we do is help law enforcement officers with their career transition to the private sector. And my thought was it was going to be a part-time job forever. That was my assumption. It's going to be something I do while on the side while having a full-time job. Within about 2 or 3 months, I had gotten so inundated with work from all the candidates that I ended up being able to leave my job, my full-time job, and now run this business full-time. And it's just skyrocketed since, and it's been a really cool experience. And yeah, we'll talk more about it, but I have no business background whatsoever. So I've been making it up as I go along, and it's just been so much fun and just loving it.
It's been so cool to see your growth over the last 3 years because I'm pretty sure I started following you too when you were on this podcast. But just to go back really quick, you said that your transition was a cautionary tale. What can you tell officers who are in that space right now who want to leave to avoid, or what should they know so that they don't get into a situation like you did?
Yeah, so I would say definitely don't let emotions drive your decisions. It was not that I necessarily made an emotional decision, but at the same time, I was just getting so frustrated and kind of fed up with work in the sheriff's office, even though I still love the agency and have a huge respect for what they do. I was just so eager and desperate to leave that when I started applying, I was just kind of applying everywhere, not really with a really good strategy. And then I got a message from a company in Reston, Virginia, which is close to where I live, saying they were interested in me and all that. And I think I was just so excited by the fact that they were offering me a little bit more of a salary, not a huge increase, but a little bit. It was a hybrid schedule, so I got to work from home 2 days a week, and I got to leave law enforcement, which is what I was wanting to do. I didn't really look into the company much. I didn't bother going on to websites like Glassdoor or Salary.com and seeing what former and current employees were saying. And later on, once I had gotten into the company and realized the mess that it was, I went onto those platforms and started realizing that the complaints that I was experiencing was something that had been going on for a decade or two already. So definitely things that if you want to leave law enforcement, have a real good strategy and take your time. Law enforcement, as you and I both know, and everyone listening probably knows, is a very identity defining career. And leaving is difficult. You go from being a cop and that's all you are, a huge part of who you are at least. When you lose that, it's really difficult, especially if you don't love your next career. So as long as you're still safe at work and everything like that, take your time when you're leaving. Try to make sure you leave for the right opportunity, not just the first thing that comes along, because that's what I did. I took the first opportunity that came along. And fortunately for me, it all worked out because it inspired me to start this company. But at the same time, if it had not worked out, I would have felt very stuck after leaving such a cool career like law enforcement.
Yeah, that's such a good point is being able to find a job after leaving that you still feel like you are fulfilled by. And what's cool is the last two people that I talked to on this podcast both were able to take their law enforcement experience and their passion that they found during law enforcement, like you with recruiting, and turn it into their career afterwards. So you're known for helping people really leverage LinkedIn and craft powerful resumes, which is part of what you do for your job. So what do you see as the biggest mistake that people make when they're writing their resumes? And then what are some game-changing strategies that you have for them that will make them stand out amongst the sea of candidates in this job hunting market?
Yeah, the job market right now is pretty brutal. A report came out just earlier this week, end of August, beginning of September 2025, saying that for the first time in about 4.5 years, there are more job seekers in America than job openings. So an already challenging job market has just gotten more challenging, unfortunately. So you mentioned resumes and LinkedIn. That's definitely two of the things that I really stress with law enforcement officers because I think they're both items that we don't really use in law enforcement. For the most part, most cops either don't have a resume or their resume is something they did or whipped together 20 years ago and haven't really touched since. And then LinkedIn, I kind of joke that cops kind of fall in two categories usually. The one side posts on social media far too much. They post about everything in their life, including political stuff. The other side don't post at all. And I'm trying to create a nice third group that posts an appropriate amount of times, but also use it to build their career. So I'll start with the resumes first. Resumes, what I usually see with law enforcement officers, and I've written, I think, almost 800 resumes now for officers, from regular patrol officers all the way up to chiefs and deputy chiefs and sheriffs. And it's a very consistent theme that most officers, when they're describing what they did in their career, are far too vague and far too generic with what they've done. I'll get a resume from someone who's worked on patrol, and they'll say that they responded to emergency calls for service.
I
And
did
I'm
that.
always like, yeah,
That
and I
was
did that
on
too.
my resume.
Yep, I did that too. And I'm like, when I get back to them, I was like, that's great. I really appreciate your service. It's awesome. But there's about, I think class, I look like 800,000 some cops in this country. So there's about 800,000 other people who can say the exact same thing as you did. And that statement right there isn't going to land you a job with Axon, Flock Safety, Motorola, whoever you want to work for. It's just far too generic. And most resumes are just end up being more like a job description than they are achievements based. And what I want candidates to do is be very, very focused on achievements. What exactly did you do and how did you do it? And trying to include metrics and data in your resume whenever you can. Even if it's something as simple as, I patrolled, a 5 square mile block with about 25,000 citizens handling around 30 calls per shift. Even something like that just makes it sound so much more impressive than saying I responded to emergency calls for service. So that's a huge part. Keeping the resume to 2 pages, maybe max three is an important one as well. A lot of cops go on to 5, 6, 7, 8 page resumes. And a lot of that is just them listing every training they ever attended. If you want to go work for Microsoft, if you were a beanbag shotgun operator like I was, no one cares about that. That's not going to help you get a job with Microsoft. And I kept that on my resume for a long time until I realized that's not going to help me in the tech world, in the recruiting world. So keeping your resume concise and trying to articulate your skill set in a way that civilians can really understand. Because for the most part, the people reading your resumes will have no prior law enforcement experience. And I joke that probably the closest they've ever come to doing what we did is watching cops on their couch. Right? If you're a SWAT operator or a patrol officer or anything else, what they're going to initially view it as is somebody just kicking down doors and tackling bad guys to the ground. And that might be a small part of what we did, but there's so much more to it as well. Talk about your problem solving abilities, talk about your leadership skills. Even if you weren't a sergeant or a lieutenant, you're still a leader. Talk about your report writing, your data analysis, all those skills that we may not articulate as well in law enforcement, they're so vital in the private sector. And you have experience with those. It's just articulating them in a way that a civilian can say, oh, yeah, I see how you could have done that. That really relates to this role. And that's where I think most officers struggle. They write their resume as if they're talking to cops instead of trying to write it towards the civilian workforce.
Well, I know that from my experience, when you are applying to bigger companies like ones that you mentioned, that they've got the applicant tracking systems too. And so sometimes a recruiter doesn't even see your resume. Sometimes it just gets automatically denied by the ATS. So are there any ways around that? Like I think LinkedIn is definitely one of the ways around it. So can you talk on how to actually get seen?
For sure. Yeah. So let me quickly cover resumes one more time with it. You mentioned ATS. That's a great point. So most companies in the private sector now have applicant tracking systems, and it's a way for companies to stay organized and streamline their hiring processes. Most recruiters in the private sector are working about 20-ish roles at a given time. And on average, each job opening in America is receiving around 250 to 300 applications. So 300 times 20 is a crap ton of resumes to receive. And for the most part, most recruiters get paid based on commission when they make a placement or a hire. So they're trying to hire as fast as possible. So they're not going to read through 300 resumes. What they do is they write up their job description on their applicant tracking system. When they hit submit, that job description gets sent out to all the job boards that they're partnered with. So like for my company, we have our ATS is called Manitoul. If I put a job in there, it will get sent out to Indeed, to Monster, to LinkedIn, to about 35 different job boards. When you, Sammy, apply for a job that I put out there, it'll get, no matter where you applied from, whether it be my website or somewhere else, it'll get funneled back to me into my ATS system. The system will then scan the job description and scan your resume and compare the two. And it's looking for keywords, skills, qualifications, duties, tasks, achievements, things like that. And what it's going to do, it's going to automatically tell me a percentage score of how close of a match you are to the job description. And it's doing that for every candidate it receives. It's then going to list candidates from the highest score to the lowest score. So if I'm a recruiter and I want to get paid, and the system says, hey, Colin, these are the top 10. Those are the ones I'll look at. If your resume is number 11, or God forbid, number 200, no human is going to see your resume. And for the most part, when I talk to officers, the biggest thing they struggle with is actually getting to the interview. Once they make the interview, they have no problem. We're great talkers. We do very well at rapport building. It's just getting to the interview. And the problem is that candidates are creating one resume and submitting it everywhere. They're not changing it at all. That no longer works in 2025. You have to be tailoring your resume to every job you apply to. So I always use the example. Let's say a job you're applying to says they want somebody who has experience mentoring new employees. They want that as a skill. On your resume, you either don't have it or you have coaching rookie officers. Even though that's the exact same thing, the wording is completely different. So the ATS, at least so far, is not smart enough to tell that that's the same skill, and you'll score lower on that. So you actually want to create your resume or change your resume. That way the words more closely align with the job description. So unfortunately, it's a little bit of a pain in the butt, and it takes some more time. But what I always say is I would rather you apply for 2 or 3 jobs a day, make each one very tailored and specific, than you applying for 20 jobs a day, but you're just sending the same resume everywhere. Because honestly, you're throwing your resume into a black hole and you'll never hear anything back. Mm-hmm. You mentioned LinkedIn as well. LinkedIn is huge, as is networking in general. The days of applying for a job and hoping to hear back are also pretty much gone. For the most part, most of my candidates are landing their jobs based on who they know, not just what they know. And LinkedIn is a huge part of that. So next time you apply for a job, don't just apply and say, oh, hopefully I'll hear back. I want you to apply. Then I want you to go to that company's LinkedIn page, go to the People's tab, and you can actually see if you have any personal connections with anybody in there. If your first connection, that's great. That means you and him or you and her are connected, already connected. Or it could be a second or third connection, which means you have a shared connection or whatever else. Use those to your advantage. Try to find people you're connected with or know someone or have a mutual connection with and reach out to him or her. And again, don't use generic messages because recruiters and people in general can sense that from a mile away. Go onto their profile and see something about them. Maybe they went to the same school as you. Maybe they have a prior law enforcement background. Maybe there's something that you can actually talk to that shows that you actually took the time to look at them specifically. You can say, oh, hey, Sammy, I saw that you were also in law enforcement. My name's Colin. I'm trying to get out of the profession. I'm really interested in comp to corporate. I would love to work for your organization. Would you mind chatting with me? You might get ignored a few times, All it takes is one person to say, sure, I'll talk to you, get on the phone call, impress them. That person might be the recruiter themselves, or they know the recruiter and can get your resume in front of the recruiter. And that's how you land a job. Just applying and hoping is not going to work anymore. You might get lucky, but most candidates are spending 6, 8, 10 months and having no interviews whatsoever because they're just trying
Yeah.
to apply and hope to hear back, and it's just not going to work.
It's really exhausting. I remember when I was job searching, I had no idea what to do. And I was moving across the country too, so that made it even more difficult. But I do remember I saw a job application on LinkedIn. I applied, and then I found the recruiter. I found the person who was, under the hiring manager, and I sent her a
Yep.
message and I was like, I really love the mission of your company. I just applied. I would love to speak with you about the role, and I ended up getting the job, and it ended up kind of, I was a recruiter too, and it ended up putting me on my recruiting career because they took a chance on me. And because the mission resonated with me. So that, I mean, little success story here too.
Yeah, I love that. And that was you actually going to the company's either website, social media platforms, whatever, and finding their mission and actually it resonating with you and you mentioning that in the message. And that's where so many candidates say, oh, I reach out to recruiters. I never hear anything back. Well, yeah, because you're sending the same message to everybody and just copying and pasting it. You're saying, hey, my name is Colin. I'm interested in your company. Can we talk? No one's going to answer that. That's just
Neither
way too
you or I
generic.
would answer that
That's
because it's
right.
like, well,
That,
yeah,
yep.
you're not actually interested.
Because to be fair, this isn't like a real like genius idea. This is being done by a lot of candidates. You won't be the only one, but a lot of them again are just being very generic. And you can set yourself apart by being more specific and talking about a very specific thing about the company or the person that interests you. You could even take another step further. You could try sending a 30-second video message as well. No one, hardly anyone's doing that. Almost everyone is sending text messages. That's all I get is text messages. But if I get a video message and it's about a job, I'm more likely to watch it. Again, don't have to always do it. It may not always work, but it's worth trying. You just have to find ways to stand out from the rest because this job market right now is just so freaking crazy that just hoping that your resume is going to be the top 1% to even get to the interview, it's a long shot for sure. Like I said, the stat was it was about 2 years old now that there was 250 applications for one job opening in America.
So, moral
So
of the story is find a way to personalize your application. So, don't just apply, don't shotgun apply to jobs. Actually, find companies you're interested in, roles you're interested in, make sure your resume is tailored to that specific role, and reach out to someone at that company, make that connection so that that's a quick in.
that's right. Yeah. And I kind of laugh. The easy apply button on LinkedIn is one of the worst things that ever happened to job seekers because people think they can go on there. Because I don't know if anyone doesn't know what that is on LinkedIn, some companies, when they post their jobs, they make it an option where you can easy apply, which basically means you apply with a click of a button. You basically hit easy apply and the resume that you already have saved on your profile gets sent to the company. But again, then you're not tailoring your resume whatsoever. You're just sending the same one, and most likely you're just going to click on that one and click on the next one, and then so on. So people tell me they've applied to 1,000 jobs in a month, and that I instantly know that they're wasting their time. Unfortunately, they're not going about it in a way that's going to be efficient whatsoever. So yeah, no, LinkedIn and just general networking is so vitally important. And one of the biggest mistakes I see officers make is starting their career transition process far too late. It's not uncommon at all for me to hear from officers who have either already left law enforcement or are within a few days or weeks of leaving and have done nothing to prepare. They haven't worked on their resume or their LinkedIn. They haven't networked whatsoever. They haven't even looked into the industries that they're trying to pursue. Because let's say you have 2 years left in law enforcement. You go onto LinkedIn or other job boards and you start researching industries that interest you. Let's say you find out you want to get into cybersecurity. You go onto cybersecurity related roles and you see that every single cybersecurity role wants the CompTIA Security Plus certification, as an example. If you find out about that the day before you need to start applying, there's nothing you can do. What you have is what you have. But if you still have a year or two left, you now have 1 or 2 years to work on that certification. That way, when you go to apply, you're no longer just a cop, even though there's a lot more to being a cop than just a cop. But you're no longer just a cop. You're now a cop who also has the exact certification that this company is looking for. So I think a lot of cops are shooting themselves in the foot by not taking the time to prepare in advance. And a lot of that is just, it's not, I wouldn't say it's laziness. It's just not knowing. So many cops have either never worked in the private sector or haven't done so in 20 or 30 years. This job market looks nothing like it did in the early 2000s or late 90s. It's a totally different world out there. There's whole new industries that didn't exist 20 years ago, and it's far more competitive now. And that's what I really try to push the message out there is to start early. Like I love hearing from officers who are retiring. It's great as well, but I want to hear from people that are still 2 or 3 years away. That I would love to, whenever I hear from somebody who still has a few years left, I'm always like, that's awesome. I'm so pumped that you reached out to me. It makes me happy to hear that. And I do think agencies can do a better job as well. This is always a topic for me, is that agencies, from my perspective, do very little to help their officers transition to the private sector. And agencies always talk about vacancies and things like that. So I do understand it. But if we really care about our officers, and that's been a huge push lately, officer wellness. But if we say we care about our officers, we need to care about them both while they're serving us in our agencies, also once they leave. Because if you don't give a crap what happens to your people once they leave your agency, you don't actually care. And someone who truly cares will care about the person forever. And so many agencies just have no interest in having anything like this topic ever discussed with their department, which is a real shame.
Let's talk about you as a resource. So, not only have you created Recruiting Heroes, you've also written a book called Beyond the Thin Blue Line. And then you also just launched Heroes Academy, or you're about to launch Heroes Academy.
Yeah,
So I know that your passion is helping police officers and veterans as well, right?
right.
Find their next
Yeah.
role after service. So yeah, let's talk about what you have turned your transition into. Tell us a little bit about everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started the company, the way it first started was kind of more helping companies hire veterans and first responders, which I did like as well. But I started realizing that the companies that were actually using my services were looking for very specific talent, and usually ones that would have required years and years of private sector experience. So I started realizing that I was finding candidates that had no background in the areas that really interest me. So I started making more of a shift towards the candidate side of things and helping candidates really prepare for the transition. The things that we offered for the longest time was just resumes and LinkedIn. And that was, I think it was really helpful. And a lot of people did very, very well with it. But I soon started realizing that there were people that had a lot more questions than just how to write a good resume. Because the idea of transition to the private sector, it's way more complex than just having a good two-page resume. There's so much more to it. And that inspired me to write Beyond the Thin Blue Line first. Yep, best-selling book on Amazon, which was really, really cool.
Cool.
If anyone wants to write a book, highly encourage it. It's not nearly as intimidating or hard as you would think. But yeah, so that came out last year and has done phenomenally well. It's sold, I think, now in over 20 countries, which is pretty cool. Even though it definitely has an
Congrats.
American, and yeah, thank you. It has an American theme for sure, but I get messages from cops in Australia and Brazil and Europe and stuff like that too. So I started realizing that obviously everyone comes from different backgrounds, different interests, different needs, but also different financial abilities as well. Working with me one-on-one, I think I'm far, far cheaper than a lot of resume writers and career coaches out there. But there are people out there that either don't want to do that or can't afford it or whatever else. And I thought, what if I write everything I know into a book? And that way that book's available for people. The digital version's like $3, and then the paperback version's like $10 or something. So it's definitely something that I wanted to make very available to people in the big scale things. People can reach out, can get it, use it, and hopefully find a great job without ever needing to talk to me if they don't want it to. And that's been very successful. But then I realized too that, not everyone's a big reader, and there's only so much you can put down in writing versus actually showing people. And that's what really inspired the Heroes Academy, which comes out on the 16th of September. And I've been working on this now for, man, 10 months now. It's wild. So it's a really cool online program. And in it, you basically get your own login and you have 48 lessons of me talking to you. It's also going to have videos. It's going to have audio versions of it. There's going to be a ton of downloadable resources. So I have my template, I have instructions on how to write a resume, I have LinkedIn tips, other free resources, companies that are hiring for law enforcement, and so much more. And it's a really cool program that I'm so pumped about. Wasn't sure how it was initially going to get the reaction was going to be. So I put out just some feelers about people wanting to join the wait list, and it's blown a couple hundred now already, which is really, really cool. So I'm really excited. It's going to be a way for people to work with me without having to one-on-one work with me, right? Because they could basically, if they wanted to get all the knowledge that I have put in the academy on a one-on-one basis, it would be like 10 or 15 lessons, which would be time consuming and also somewhat expensive as well. So this is just available for anybody who wants to transition to the private sector. It helps people understand what is out there because some cops have no clue what they want to do next. So I talk about that, talk about transferable skills, talk about companies you can look into, how to write a resume, how to use LinkedIn, interview tips, salary negotiations, and so much more. If you can't tell, I'm really excited about it.
I'm really excited about it too. I wish that I had that back in 2021 when I was trying to figure out what the heck I was doing. Especially because, like you said, it's hard to, like, what if you have no idea what you want to do? I guess you have to have the foundational resources, like making sure that your resume is good and all the other tips that you're going to give. So I'm really glad that you're creating a space for people to really hone in on what they know and what they're good at and make that transition easier.
Yeah, I'm pumped. And another cool thing that's coming kind of parallel, but also with the Heroes Academy, is called the Heroes Community. And that's basically like a private community. So it's basically like a somewhat like a LinkedIn, but it's private. It's literally only the people that sign up for it. And what's cool is every single week, I want to have one coaching call, like a live coaching call where you and I could get on a call and you can ask me questions. So anybody can jump on the call once a week and ask me questions about their resume, about their LinkedIn, whatever else. And I'll be coaching on a topic as well. And then I'll have office hours. I'm going to have friendly competitions. I'm going to bring in recruiters and hiring managers from the private sector, share job openings, and it's going to be very cool. And it's going to get people to not just be stuck to one platform like LinkedIn, which can become somewhat vague and scammers and things like that. This one's be very tailored towards law enforcement, for law enforcement, by law enforcement. So I'm really
Amazing.
pumped for that. Yeah, it's gonna
And
be cool. It's gonna be really, really neat.
Is the Heroes Academy just for law enforcement or who all can join that?
So anyone's welcome to join it, but all the examples I use in the academy and all the techniques I teach are geared towards law enforcement. But it doesn't mean that somebody from a military background couldn't go in there and use the same experience and same lessons to help them as well. I've definitely in recent months and last year or so made a little bit more of a shift towards law enforcement versus military. One, because I ended up realizing that's the majority of people who reached out to me were law enforcement. And then also, I have no military background. I think I can still help them for sure, but I think it's also more authentic to helping people from the background that I have as well. And then there's a lot of resources for veterans coming out too. So if there's a veteran who needs help, 100% happy to do it, but it's definitely more tailored towards the law enforcement field. And it's going to be really neat. I think it's going to help a lot of people. Yeah, it's everything I wish I had known. I talk about my mistakes, my successes. I pull in some really inspirational stories. Brian, I talk about Brian in the academy some as well, showing candidates and law enforcement officers what they're capable of. That way they don't feel confined to one industry. Because I see that a lot too. So many cops think they have to go into security or something similar, which is great if you want to do that, but you shouldn't feel stuck in that industry if you don't want to do that.
Yeah, and that's part of why we're here at Cop to Corporate because we want to show people who have gotten out of law enforcement and aren't necessarily in security like you. You've turned your recruiting career into this amazing resource for law enforcement. So we are so grateful for you. I think we talked about really good tips and steps that people can take today. But if you could leave us with one really important thing, if people aren't ready to take action today, but something that they should be thinking about when they're thinking about leaving law enforcement, what would you tell a cop?
Yeah, so I would say stay in law enforcement as long as you're happy there. It's a phenomenal career that can open so many doors for you. Stay there as long as you can. But even if you're years away, start slowly thinking about what you may want to do once your time in uniform is up. It doesn't have to be applying for jobs or even working on your resume, but just start thinking about it. Go onto a few job boards and seeing what's out there. And again, don't just feel stuck to one type of industry. Be open to anything because you might find a whole industry you had never previously considered. And what I always tell my candidates to do is write down 5 to 10 things that they really enjoyed from their law enforcement career. So it shouldn't be things like shouldn't be like sergeant or a job title. It should be things like coaching, mentoring, firearms, investigations, and then go on to LinkedIn, go to the job board, and you don't actually have to search by job title. You can search by that interest. So if you like firearms, type in firearms. You might find a whole industry that's related to firearms you never previously considered. And just slowly start thinking about what will come next. Because once you have a general idea, you can slowly start making a plan of action, which will make the transition so much easier. Because with the wave of AI and technology, I don't see the job market getting any better than it is now. If anything, it might get worse. So it's going to take real strategy to be successful in this job hunt process. And so many candidates are trying to go out there by themselves and feel isolated. Just know you're not alone because there's so many resources like Recruiting Heroes, like Cop to Corporate, that are willing to work with you and help you in any way we can, whether it be just a friendly conversation or full-on services. I'm happy to do either. I always kind of joke I'm a terrible business person because I usually give away so much crap for free and so much resources for free just because I want to help my fellow officers. And yeah, believe in
Yeah,
yourself and know that you're destined for greatness after law enforcement for sure.
Colin does free resume Fridays sometimes, so definitely follow him on LinkedIn. And you have given such amazing advice today. And like you said, cops out there, you are not alone. There are so many resources and ways for you to still be part of this community and figure out that transition it can be way easier than you think it is. So, Colin, thank you so much for coming back on here. It's really good to see you. If you're a former officer or you're thinking about what life after law enforcement is going to look like, I hope that this conversation gave you encouragement and ideas for your own next chapter. So, Colin, thank you again.
Thank you, Sam, so much for having me on. I had a great time.